Welcome to Skillwork Forum. As a reminder, this podcast exists to help companies overcome the skilled labor shortage in America. I'm Tim. I'm joined here with my partner, Brett, from Skillwork. And today we're going to be talking about preparing for the return to normalcy, or how to prepare for the oncoming economic rebound that we're all hoping and anticipating. So this week, as we were thinking about this topic, Brett, it got me to thinking about a term that maybe we don't use a lot in business, the idea of potential energy. It's a physics term, but I think it applies well with what we're seeing right now, or at least what we're preparing for. So if you're not familiar with the term, essentially it's potential energy is stored energy that an object has just because of its position or its state. So in practical terms, you can think about a bicycle at the top of a hill, waiting to go down the hill. So the potential energy is the release of that energy as the cyclist goes down that steep hill, or maybe even an archer with an arrow drawn back. So the potential energy is the energy that exists in that drawn bow ready to release the arrow. And for me, something near and dear to me as a kind of a ski guy, the idea of a snow skier at the top of a steep drop in, waiting to drop in. So essentially, it's just energy that's waiting to be released with some form of trigger. Maybe that's gravity, or the archer releasing the bow, or a skier dropping in. So the idea of that, as it relates to what we're going through right now, Brett, is you and I believe, and we join others that believe, that there's just a lot of pent-up demand, a lot of pent-up energy in our big, great economic engine that's waiting to be released. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about that today. And I thought I'd ask you to tee us off, Brett, here initially, and talk about that as it relates to the idea of jobs, and particularly in construction space and project on the horizon.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so, yeah, like you said, it's an interesting time in that, everything was moving at such the economy was on such a torrid pace, and then like we've never seen before. It just literally, in so many areas, in so many companies, it came to a lurching stop, so to speak. And now it's trying to understand and kind of be ready and maneuver through this idea of when it's going to open back up and how fast is it going to open back up, type of thing. And so, in late February, early March, we had an unemployment rate of 3.5%. One of the lowest unemployment rates we've ever had. And in the last few weeks, it's well documented. Everybody's heard it. We've had 16 million people apply for unemployment, and obviously that number is likely to grow even a little bit larger. But one thing I think that we all know, and it's kind of that pent up energy, those 16, 20 million, whatever it ends up being, there's an example of people, they're ready to go. They want to go back to work. The idea that they want to sit at home and collect unemployment, or this just isn't reality. It's such an unknown for people. People, they want to go to work and type of thing. And I believe what we're going to see, and I think as business leaders, something we need to be thinking about and preparing for is I think we're going to see a big boom in manufacturing. We talked about it a little bit last week, Tim, about the impact of some of this, of us being less reliant on some international companies and stuff other countries, I should say, for a lot of our essential medical needs and so forth. So I really think there's a pent up energy to bring that manufacturing back here, which is going to put a lot of strain and a lot of it's going to get those 16, 20 million people obviously back to work quickly, but a lot of those are going to go back to work, in the hospitality space and in other spaces where they were, retail and so forth. So, the other one too, Tim, that we talk about because it's in our space a lot, and that is this potential energy, this release in these construction projects. We know from the companies that we work with, they were preparing for a huge spring, summer on a lot of projects, and now that that's kind of just waiting and kind of coiled up like a spring, waiting to release. So I think it's two great examples of this potential energy and this economic boom that we're going to see a big push into. So.
Yeah, it's the picture is like the spring you just mentioned. It's many businesses, including our own, where it's like we're poised, ready to release this combined energy of all of our organizations, but we're kind of held back right now by what's really an unprecedented restraint. And some of it's imposed, but a lot of it is a self-restraint that people are looking out for each other. Caution and concern that's holding us back. But I think the good news is that soon, hopefully very soon, our collective potential energy, as we're calling it, will all be released. And this idea, we use the example of a cyclist or an archer or a skier, and in each of the cases, there's some preparation that went into being ready for that moment when the archer releases the arrow or the cyclist goes careening down the hill. In my mind, I'm looking at that example of the skier because as a skier myself, it really hits home to me because it's kind of paradoxical in that when you're on the top of a mountain, and those of you that have skied before, this may be relevant to you, and for others maybe not, but just hang with me a second here. It's strange when you're at the very top of a very steep hill as a skier, and you're about to drop into that. Everything in your being is saying, lean back, fall back against the mountain. It's safer to lean back as you're going into a steep decline. But in fact, in order to actually navigate the downhill and stay under control, you have to lean forward over the tips of your skis. It seems completely unnatural to do that because your body says that's danger that way. But in fact, leaning forward into the tips of your skis is how you maintain control and are able to control your descent and control your speed as you go down the hill. So as just a form of application with respect to what we're looking for, as we enter into the season, the idea of being prepared, being at the edge, and as you get an opportunity to move back into your business or to take advantage of this economic bounce back, the ability to lean forward into that, and maybe rather than being risk averse, look for this as a potential to take advantage of opportunities by leaning forward and being able to control the descent and be nimble and agile as you head down the hill. So I think that's a good way to look at it, the preparation, and then maybe doing something that feels a little unnatural, that's leaning forward rather than pulling back. So that's kind of a way that helped me understand it a little bit more. And I know in terms of preparation, Brett, you were kind of alluding to earlier when we were chatting about taking advantage of this time to prepare yourself as a leader to be ready for when it time comes to drop in, so to speak.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think you're spot on, Tim. These, in every way, I mean, right now, when we even find when you go out and take a walk around the lake or something to get outside, and you see somebody else coming, you have this natural tendency to maybe step a little bit away type thing. So there's this caution that is now starting to get ingrained in us a little bit, and I think we run the risk of finding the right balance in our business side to we're being cautious, Tim, as you know, right now in non-essential spending, and I think those are good cautions in a time like this when you've got some unknown, but if you're too cautious, as you're indicating, where you're pulling back as opposed to leaning in, you really run a risk of really I'm not a skier, but of getting passed on the hill, I guess. So I think it's the same thing. Opportunities like this, there is this pent up energy. I think manufacturing is going to boom. I think the construction is going to come back. I think the companies that maneuver or prepare coming out of this, I should say, are probably the ones that are going to do the best coming out. And so, as leaders, when we look at kind of this potential energy thing, I think the thing that I would really encourage myself and Tim included, but other leaders, is, there's a saying, there's a quote, I should say, that, something to the effect that as leaders, if you should always be growing, never arriving. The point being that you've got to constantly, if you get to a point and you think I've arrived, you've really started to move backwards. I think you grow the most in the toughest times. And so right now we're going through a very tough time in a lot of our businesses. Even if we're still working, it's a tough time to try to understand it and to keep our people from being scared and so forth. And so all of this is exposing a lot of opportunities, I believe. So if you run from it, if you're cautious from it versus leaning into it, I think you miss an opportunity. And the biggest risk of when you go through something tough is that as soon as things do return to this quote unquote normal, you miss it. You missed the opportunity to grow in it. And that I think is an unfortunate situation. I think as leaders, you don't want to miss that. I mean, there's been, it's well documented, both coming out of the Great Depression and other economic downturns. Some of the greatest companies that we have today came out of those. And so, it's unfortunate, but fortunate that a lot of these situations tend to thin the field a little bit sometimes. And so, but on the backside or on the other side of that are these organizations that really come out strong and prepared. And so I think that's where you want to be. I would encourage us not to waste this moment. I think there's opportunity to grow in every moment. I think this is one of the biggest. I think 5 years from now, we're going to look back and there's going to be some new businesses that come out of this. There's going to be companies that took advantage of this manufacturing. There's going to be companies that figure out new things that technology is being created coming out of this time. There'll be some companies we don't even know the names of right now that will be billion-dollar companies in a few years. And so encourage us to lean in. So
yeah, that's great. And I think that what causes people, to those that go off the edge and trust the lean forward versus those that stay at the top of the hill or maybe take a safer way down. I really think it's overcoming our own natural hesitancy and a risk averseness, and it really is those that are bold enough to look for this as an opportunity to lean forward, but not with just unbounded optimism that's not based in reality. Because the fact of the matter is, like you said, Brett, that there's going to be some thinning out, and there is going to be some challenges that we're facing, and we're not suggesting in any way that you go into this with just willy-nilly, so to speak. And I mean, that you wouldn't put a brand new skier at the top of a double black and say, have fun, off you go. So it's that idea of facing the facts with faith, which is very important to us, but not with unrealistic expectations. And we were talking a little bit earlier, both Brett and I like to read a lot of leadership books, and we learn a lot from history. And a great leadership book, probably one of the greatest ones from the early 2000s, was Jim Collins' book that was Good to Great. Most business leaders, if you haven't read that, You ought to. It's really good. But in there, he interviewed a lot of people that represented taking something from good to great, that next step. And he interviewed Vice Admiral Jim Stockdale. Many people may know him, many people may not. He famously or infamously was selected as Ross Perot's vice president nominee back in the day. But earlier on in his life, he was a naval aviator. He was captured in the Vietnam War. He spent 8 years in the Hanoi Hilton as a prisoner of war. He was a senior ranking officer of all the American prisoners of war during the Vietnam era. And he's, again, 8 years there. And so Jim Collins was interviewing him and asking him about, what was it like to survive? How did you come out the other side of that? And as they were having this conversation, something struck Jim Collins, and he asked the question, Stockdale, who was it that made it? What determined those that made it versus those that didn't? And gets back to Brett, your point about businesses that will make it versus those that don't. And I took that. I didn't want to get this out of context. So the quote, that response that Admiral Stockdale had was, he said, well, that's an easy question to answer. And he said the ones that didn't make it or didn't make it out were the optimists, which I found very not what I was expecting. And so that response is called the Stockdale Paradox. And he went on to say the optimists, they were the ones who said we're going to be out by Christmas, meaning the prisoners of war. Christmas would come, Christmas would go, and then they'd say we're going to be out by Easter. Easter would come and Easter would go, and then Thanksgiving and so on. And they died actually of a broken heart. And after another long pause, Collins goes on to quote Stockdale when he turned to Jim Collins, the author of the book Good to Great, and said, this is a very important lesson. And I think it applies to what we're facing right now, Brett. He said, you must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. And Collins went on to say, to this day, I carry a mental image of Stockdale admonishing the optimist, we're not getting out by Christmas, so deal with it. The point of all that in the Stockdale Paradox, Brett, is the idea that face what's going on with faith, with confidence, but also with reality, not with unrealistic expectations. And maybe you have a thought on that as we finish up today.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great, Good to Great is a great book. Like you said, many business leaders have read it. It's been quoted many times, but that Stockdale Paradox is very true, because, like you said, we can be. I'm very much an optimist. So are you, Tim. I think it's needed. I think it's good to be very optimistic, to believe and fight through, but not to the point, and especially in a time like this, to where you don't accept the realities. If you need to, we say, tackle it head on. And so, trying to ignore your issues or ignore your problems or ignore your reality is not going to make them go away. So the quicker we acknowledge it, address it, grow from that as well, and come out of it, which is exactly, in somewhat in reference to, I mean, obviously he was a prisoner of war. We're not in that situation. And so, but it's a great point. I'm sure he was a very optimistic guy, but he also, dealt with the reality of it. And we all need to do that right now. These are tough times. But once you embrace that and then start to work on how you grow coming out of it, I think those will be the companies that will succeed in a large way.
Yeah, and so Admiral Stockdale was a man of great faith, and I think it's important that those of us, and Skillwork is our number one principle is everything we do, we exist to honor God, and we do have faith and confidence, but we also are very pragmatic and realistic. So it's really important to make sure that we're entering into this season with that mindset. So I guess we'll leave you with one question today, those of you listening, just to give you something to think about it. considering some of the things that we spoke about today, some of the insights, the question to you and the challenge to you is, what are you doing to prepare for the economic rebound? Are you poised and ready to go? Or have you taken this time to your advantage to prepare as the potential energy is set to release? Are you going to be one of those businesses that take advantage of it and grow as a result of this? So thanks for joining us today. We're very grateful for your time. And Brett and I would ask you if you have any needs for skilled workers, or you'd like some more information about what we do at Skillwork, how your company can overcome the skilled shortage in America, just go to our website and visit us there at skillwork.com. Until next time, take care.